Hello everyone, welcome to the show. I'm Jupy, a long-time Dead by Daylight player, Prestige 100 Xenomorph and Prestige 100 Springtrap main, who occasionally dabbles in Kaneki. Now, Dead by Daylight is one of the few asymmetrical games that's actually survived the death spiral of such a genre. Over 9 years it's been playable, and it's bigger than ever with the release of the FNAF chapter this year and my beloved Springtrap, showcasing this with record high player counts. And as such, Behaviour have been recently trying to make the newer player experience as approachable as possible with a bit of questionable success. But the player onboarding has always been one of Behaviour's biggest flaws. They attempt to mold the game around the new players, warping the game for veterans, as opposed to helping said new players understand the game that's already been established. It's what brings upon the controversial changes like anti-tunnel and anti-slug. I've had numerous friends tell me from clips and reels that Dead by Daylight looks like a lot of fun, but when they start playing it, they're confused as to what is even happening 99% of the time, how they went down, why the survivor didn't take damage. It's 9 years of knowledge that we've kind of garnered and presume it's base kit, which it isn't, nor is it intuitive. DBD's current tutorial feels like it was crammed in at the last second, to be honest, before the due date, and hasn't really been updated since that point, outside of some anti-tunnel changes telling you barely about base kit BT. So that's what this video is going to be about. Dead by Daylight's current tutorial, why it sucks, and how Behaviour could fix it to make the new player onboarding as smooth as possible. To start with, Dead by Daylight's current tutorial feels more like a museum exhibit of what Dead by Daylight games actually are. For the Survivor tutorial, you're dropped into a cut-off section on the map and you learn basic controls, how to crouch, fix a gen, hide in a locker and unhook. Then the exit gate is powered and you leave. No pressure from the killer end, no scaling for what a real game scenario would be. It's like an escape room for a 5-year-old. On the killer side, you play as Trapper, they get you to set a trap once, but besides that, they really gloss over what killer powers actually do. You chase a survivor who runs like a headless chicken in the open in a circle, then hook them, and that's it. The tutorial doesn't teach you how to apply pressure, to know how to keep 4 survivors busy, or even that there are 4 survivors in a trial, or to identify key points on the map to defend. The game has walls and walls of text to accompany the other factors of the game as well, such as perks and items, but they're not written to cover scenarios. They're basically glossing over the important parts of the game, which means, in short, they're teaching you how the buttons work, but not actually how to play the game. Sure, they teach you kind of how to play DBD, but they don't teach you how to play DBD, if that makes sense. It never explains key concepts like map pressure, perk synergy, looping fundamentals, killer powers and the types of powers, zoning, and when to drop chase. The tutorial just tells you fix gen, hide in locker, and escape. Whereas in a real match, you're being insta-bluetoothed by a Wesker and being kicked off gens with pain res and Dead Man's Switch. There's a pretty big gap. It teaches you Dead by Daylight is a stealth-based game, when in reality that identity was gone a long time ago, and Behaviour seems behind on the times on this. It's kind of like teaching someone to swim by showing them someone drinking water. Not only does Behaviour's tutorial miss concept, it outright teaches bad habits. For example, you're instructed to throw a pallet for 0 reason in the tutorial. What the fuck? A, why waste a resource? B, why when someone is being hooked against literally any other time? And C, you're literally telling the killer where you are. But of course the tutorial doesn't show the ramifications for this, it just shows the killer leave the area. Not only that, but it outright encourages hiding in lockers. Sure, it shows it working against you in the tutorial, but it tells you specifically they're a great place to hide, when in reality, that's only the case against aura reading. Any killer with a smidgen of game sense will find your ass if they had any idea you were there. The amount of times I'm called a cheater because I won't hear a scream from friends to the end, and so I'll check a locker where the player was last seen and find them. Dead by Daylight's tutorial also lacks explaining perks, the blood web, the shrine, offerings, items, the shop. The game just gives access to an interface without explaining it. Like starting a job as a graduate and your boss just hands you the entire tax code and says have fun. Why does any of this matter though? Dead by Daylight's player retention is a huge issue it cannot seem to solve. New players come and go so quickly, largely due to not understanding the basic fundamentals of how Dead by Daylight is played, and from being confused as to what even happened most of the time. Without a foundation to kind of base their experience on, the game feels like they're being punished instead of learning. Though, to be honest, that's all of Dead by Daylight, but I digress. A better tutorial isn't to baby these new players, it's to stop them from quitting after being tunneled a couple times because they don't know the basics of the game and how to counter these situations. Alright behaviour, let's pretend you're listening and I'll spitball some ideas that would be great onboarding for new players to Dead by Daylight. First of all, Dead by Daylight's tutorial isn't exactly obvious. I've got friends with about 100 hours, so pretty new, who didn't even know a tutorial existed. For a brand new account, before you can even press play, it should be mandatory to do the tutorial. For said tutorial, we should keep the current Dead by Daylight tutorial with some minor tweaks, as it does teach you extremely bare bones fundamentals. However, it won't be the only tutorial. Dead by Daylight will implement multiple bite-sized tutorials that'll be optional alongside the default ones. These tutorials will be specialized, focusing on mechanics such as looping and tile identification, how to apply pressure to the map, scenarios to avoid or to promote, such as 3genning and avoiding crowding a hook while as survivor while the killer camps, and strategies and their counterplay. For example, tunneling explained, but also explain that if someone is being tunneled, slam gens and leave them on hook until the last second so that they are unironically safer for longer. They need to cover topics that affect Dead by Daylight as a whole, such as anti-tunnel, anti-camp, what a conspicuous action is, what a hex is. These will be designed in a way so you can skip certain sections to be able to understand specific concepts better, and will be designed around being replayable and not stale. This allows players to finish a game, maybe having lost, and be able to analyze these extra tutorials to figure out what went wrong and how they could have played better, and to assist with that, now what I mean by this term is a designated playground for you to trial things against bots in order to practice specific things. Now I'm not talking about the custom games. This will be customizable, however, if you wish, in order for it to be a useful resource to new and old players. For Survivor, it would be a map with most of the generic tiles in it, which is good because they've recently standardized those across all the maps. That's why you've seen a lot of the similar tiles that weren't normally in maps like Eerie or Garden of Joy in those maps. But preferably for this, we would also have a deployable, customizable AI killer to practice against. Preferably for this, that improve the AI so it isn't walking around like a grandma with a knife. But this would allow survivors to trial looping on certain tiles in order to learn to judge the distance of the killer, when to drop pallets and other useful things. It gets you a feel for the game without having to queue and go down in 5 seconds because you don't know how looping works. Not only does this help new players learn looping, but it would work well for veterans practicing their looping against the new killer who came out. It's a resource literally every player would benefit from. For killer, we could also utilize this map and add a way for the killer to be able to play on it as the killer, with access to any killer in order to practice their powers and how to utilize them best. This would be useful for practicing techs for killers as well, as the only way we have right now to be able to learn killer techs is opening a custom game against bots that you basically have to reopen every 5 minutes. How this hasn't been implemented already, I have no idea, but it's such a good solution that it'll again benefit everyone. It's so irritating trying to learn techs on Kaneki or Wesker, only for the bots to pop the generators so I have to just reload the lobby all over again. This again also helps behavior in the long term as well, as it will provide a way for people to test killers that they might buy, which means people are more likely to purchase a killer if they find them fun in the trial mode. This not only helps people to learn Dead by Daylight in a stress-free environment, but also to flexibly learn the game. Perhaps prompts could be enabled to help with specific mechanics, with video clips showcasing the best way to run a tile or how to use a killer's power. Now the devs have stated that a replay mode can't come to Dead by Daylight, which is due to their spaghetti code apparently. However, something they could implement is a way for people to understand what happened in a game. For example, you swung into a dead hard. You've got no clue what's happening because you're a new player. However, in the endgame, the endgame chat will tell you with a pre-made clip, it'll showcase a pre-made clip to kind of demonstrate what happened. Or say, for example, you got hit by the unknown through a wall. Again, they'd show a pre-made clip showing that it can go through walls. The devs don't even need to record these. I guarantee content creators in the community would send in clips for it in droves. While it may be confusing at first, it'll provide context on what you messed up with and how to counteract it in future, which would also allow for assistance in learning all of the complicated perks and interactions in Dead by Daylight without watching 100 hours of Obscur. These replay clips could also be used to showcase what a perk/killer does with a small video clip a la Marvel Rivals, where it's shown in detail how each ability works, perhaps showing even power utilization tips like Rivals as well, like how Krasu's M2 has auto-aim while in body mode. All the unintuitive things with killer powers neatly available in the little tab in their bio. Another thing new players struggle with is deciding who to play and who to sink blood points into as a new player. And as such, having a few characters DVD specifically recommend you to level up or to play when you buy the game is essential. Obviously focusing on unpaid killers and survivors, so for killer they'd likely recommend you learn the game with Wraith, level up to get Hag's perks, or survivor level up Meg or Feng Min. Giving players some direction to get started with is essential for their initial enjoyment of the game. So I really hope we can see some of these sorts of systems be implemented for both the old and new players to bring a bunch of new people to the fog. A better tutorial means less frustrated players and a better Dead by Daylight for all of us. In the end, everyone wins. Thanks so much for watching. I've been and will be busy playing Clair Obscur. Oh my god, it's so good. So I'm a bit busy, but I've got a special video in the pipeline I'm excited to release relatively soon, which will spark the start of my new series, Week to Peak, where I attempt to master a killer within a week. Keep your ears peeled for that though. I do have a very special guest on the first episode. In the meantime though, make sure to like and subscribe and let me know your idea for DVD's tutorials in the comments. I'd love to read your ideas. Thanks for watching and good night.